History is a disputed term in the U.S. today. From school boards, libraries, universities, museums, and even the executive branch, it has become standard to doubt the relevance of history and historical methods to personal and public life. The past, some argue, has become too distant, too removed, at times too distorted, to hold meaning for the present. History cares only for dates and the names of great men. What does it have to do with me? How have historians responded? Everything has a history, wrote James Grossman, executive director of the American Historical Association, in a 2015 column for the AHA's Perspectives on History. Everything has a history means that history is always relevant, perhaps even always essential. In the introduction of its 2023 Statement on Standards of Professional Conduct, the American Historical Association also asserted the openness of the field. How then do we bridge the gap between the view of history as removed and history as integral to human experience? Has the divide between the discipline of history and public perception of what history is become too wide? A close study of the relationship between history and genealogy, the study of descent and a distant branch of historical inquiry, may help to shed light on these questions. What is genealogy? When you hear the term genealogy, you may think of family trees, websites like Ancestry.com or Family Search, or DNA kits. Genealogical research takes many forms, but its core focus is following and corroborating lines of descent starting from the present and descending into the near or distant past. On the surface, genealogy and history seem to have a lot in common over their shared fascination with the past. Conversations with two individuals closely involved with these fields reveal there is more to the story.
My name is Megan McDonald, and I am the research librarian here at the Monroe County History Center, and by default, I'm also the county genealogist.
I'm Susan Johnson. I live in Bargersville, Indiana.
As a research librarian and genealogist for one of the largest counties in Indiana, Megan's view of the relationship between genealogy and history is informed by her unique position at a public history institution. In Megan's view, genealogy and history are closely related.
I mean, genealogy is family, and that is a part of history, but history is also, community, space. Genealogy is like a tiny sliver of history. Like here, we're a local history and genealogy library. That says it kind of in our title. You can't have one without the other because these people who have lived here helped shape the local history.
The genealogists Megan works with don't always see it that way.
We have plenty of people who come in here who do genealogy who could care less about the history of the place that their family came from. They just want to be like, oh, my family lived here, my family lived here, my family lived here, and then they came to Indiana. They're just trying to follow that line and just trying to make the connections.
To Susan Johnson, genealogy is about personal meaning and connection to people both past and present.
It helps me understand who I am more and where I come from and the connection and the people that I have met through the years of the research is what's been such a blessing. At first, it more was just like a hobby, but now it's like I look at it every day. It's constantly on my mind, and then I have my tree on my phone, on my tablet, on the computer. So, I can look at it at any time. And so it's more like an obsession now than like a hobby.
Over the last 40 years, Susan's research into the Johnson and Paris lines of her family tree has led to hours and hours in the archives, the creation of a Johnson family genealogical network, and to the putting up of a state highway marker at Johnson's Crossroads in Monroe County, West Virginia.
At that time, it was all going to the courthouses, going to the genealogy libraries in the county where your family was from. So I made many trips over to Illinois, several trips to Ohio, and downtown Indianapolis, just looking for records, and then as things progressed and it became more digitalized, I have switched to keeping my tree online on Ancestry and I do most of my research online on Ancestry, but I still have at times gone to courthouses and the clerk's office and things like that, looking at their records.
Much of Susan's work is reminiscent of the shared values of historians outlined in the AHA's Statement on Standards.
When I would go to the library, I would have to write notes or take copies of pages of books and then take it home and try to piece things together. As I progressed in my research, I realized I was getting mistakes, and so I don't put anything in my tree anymore unless I have documentation to show why that person should be in my tree. And I'm trying to go back in my early research and add documentation and add pictures just for future genealogists. And I've done my DNA, and so people that are linked with me could get on my tree and see the documentation. But a lot of times when I'm looking on Ancestry and I'm looking at other people's trees, if they don't have any documentation, I don't even bother looking at their tree, because I'm like, I can't be sure that they have correct information.
Yet when asked if she views herself as a historian, this was Susan's answer.
No. But I love it now. I love history now, where, I didn't really so much.
Why? If Susan's work is not history, then what is?
I would say a historian would be someone who studies history, is knowledgeable about history. I wouldn't say that I'm very knowledgeable about history in general, just specific areas maybe, and maybe specific times. But genealogy, I think, is more about the study of your family's history. And so I feel like I know quite a bit about that.
Is Susan's perspective unique to her? Megan's experience working with other genealogists reveals the opposite.
Genealogists don't see themselves as historians because they're just like, I'm just trying to get these names and trying to figure out where they live. I'm not writing papers, I'm not researching, looking at maps, cross-referencing. But a lot of them do, but I think a lot of the kind of armchair genealogists especially don't see themselves as historians, but why not? They're looking into their history.
The separation between the fields, as voiced by Susan and Megan, is also echoed within the discipline of history. According to historian Francesca Morgan, there has been a long-standing estrangement between historians and genealogists' practices in the United States since the professionalization of history at the turn of the 20th century. The rise of bottom-up historical methods in the 1970s and 80s, as well as the honing of historical interests towards local and microhistories in recent decades, have both worked to draw the two fields together in closer proximity. But even though family history and genealogy are burgeoning areas of focus within the historical discipline, actual cooperation between historians and genealogists is limited. So what is the path forward? Genealogy and history undeniably have distinct and differing areas of emphasis, but are the degrees of separation between the fields greater than the ability to find common ground and shared curiosity about the past? This question has implications for broader concerns about the perception of history among the general public today. Perhaps genealogy, especially in its ties to public history institutions, presents historians with a model for engagement outside the discipline and a potential path forward for garnering public interest and trust. At the Monroe County History Center, Megan works to encourage a similar confidence in history as both relevant and meaningful among those she collaborates with.
And you are doing history and it is related. It doesn't matter if they lived here for 1 year or 200 years. Like, this place influenced them and they influence this place. It's like there's a permanent record that your family was here. That's the history right there. But I also want them to know that it's like, no, you can do this too. We do have people kind of every once in a while apologizing that they're like, oh, I didn't go to college, I don't know how to do this. And you can do this. and you're allowed to do this. Like, I think some people don't think that they're allowed to do that kind of stuff because they don't have that training or they don't have a degree or something. That's when they also get really, really excited to be like, oh my God, this is so old, I get to touch it. You don't need a fancy degree to be given access to this stuff. Like, we are a public institution. This is your history. Kind of just like reassure them that it's okay for them to get their hands dirty. It's okay for them to rifle through all these boxes. It's okay to like read these old cursive court records and all that kind of stuff. And I think it makes them feel really good. And they're like, wow, I'm doing it. It's like, yeah, you are. It's like, you know, you use all these together to kind of create your story.
As Grossman said, everything has a history means that history is always relevant, perhaps even always essential. Therein lies a new historian's prerogative, to remind a public mired in the narrative of a contested, distant past that history is not only accessible, but also directly applicable to all aspects of their life. Genealogy has garnered so much public participation precisely because it makes the past personal. As historian Joseph Amato wrote, genealogy and family history help us see ourselves as actors in an immediate lived history. Genealogists know that knowledge of the past, even in the form of names, dates, and places, is capable of profoundly influencing one's sense of self. Maybe it is time for historians to echo Amato's position that, producing the fruit of all true historical study, family history expands us far beyond blood and name to acknowledge and imagine, to imagine and acknowledge how vast the variety of other places and peoples. It is in this vastness that opportunities for discovery, connection, and recalibration between the discipline of history and the public are possible.